What are the events in page lifecycle? In which events are the controls fully loaded? This is the first and the most important question in ASP.NET Web Forms. Here is the diagram of all the events in the page lifecycle. It starts from pre-int and ends at unload. Okay, but you do not need to explain or remember all of them. Here I will explain the 5 most important events which you can remember. Okay, first event is init. This event fires after each control has been initialized, meaning all the control in the page like text box button started initialization at this event. Okay, or you can say that creation of that control started processing. Okay, next important event is preload. After initialization, in this event you can set properties or default values of the control. That is preload is for. Next important event is load. So after preload event, all the controls are ready at this event. Ready means, for example, in case of text box, after text box load event, you can assign values or text to text box control, right? Because it is fully ready after the load event only. Next important event is pre-render. It allows the final changes to the page or its controls. For example, suppose you want to change some property, some color of the text box, you can do that in this event. Then a very main event is render. This event render generates the client side HTML. This is like displaying the text box to the output screen. That is the render event for. And the last one is unload. This event is used for clean up the code, like it will unload or clean the text box control after there is no use of it. Okay, that is the purpose of unload. So these were some of the most important events in page lifecycle. Now the next part of the question was, in which event the controls are fully loaded? And you already know the answer. Yes, the answer is page load event. That is the event where the controls fully loaded. What is the difference between server.transfer and response.redirect? First, let's check what is the similarities between two. Okay, both these methods are used to redirect the user's browsers from one page to another page. That is the purpose of response.redirect and server.transfer. For redirection only. Now let's see the difference. Here you can see the diagram of response.redirect method. Suppose a client will send a request for page1.aspx to the server. Now inside the page 1, after some logic, it is required to call page 2. So if you are using response.redirect for this, then it will send the response back from server to the client, and then client will then redirect to the page 2 from the server only. So this is also we call like the round trip. Okay, and as you can see, this round trip is not good for performance because it is making this redirection slow, right? The better option is to directly go from page 1 of the server to page 2 of the same server. That will be fast, right? For that we have to use server.transfer. In case of server.transfer, client will first send the request to page 1, and from there only the request will go to the page 2. If the client will ask for page 2 inside page 1, then it will go from server to the same server. Okay, like server page 1 of the server to page 2 of the same server. Then there is no round trip required, and finally this page 2 response will be sent to the client. So this is like server.transfer, and the definition is response.redirect uses round trip back to the client for redirecting the page. It is a slow technique, but it maintains the URL history in the client browser for all the pages. Okay, so if you are an end user, then you know, okay, I visited page 1 and page 2 in the browser history section. Now in server.transfer, page processing transfer from one page to another page without making the round trip back to the client browser. Okay, it is a faster technique, but it does not maintain the URL history in the page client browser for all pages. If you are an end user, then in the browser you will find the page 1 only, not any history of page 2, because in this internal server transfer, page name is never updated or changed. It will always remain the page 1 only. This is like the one disadvantage of server.transfer. What are the different types of caching? Let's first quickly revise the caching here, okay? Client will request the data from the server, and then server will request this data from the database. Then database send back the response to the server, and then server will send the data to the client. This is the normal process, okay? Now some data will be requested multiple times from the client, right? So in order to improve the performance, server will store this data in the cache, and next time client will request this data, then instead of going to the database, server will retrieve the data from the cache only, okay? Now that is caching. Now let's answer how many types of caching are there in ASP.NET Web Forms. We have 3 types of caching. Page output caching, which caches the whole page HTML in the cache, okay? Page output caching, page fragment caching, and data caching. I think with their name you can guess how they work. Page output caching I already explained. It allows you to cache the output of the entire page. This is useful when a page contains all the static content. Then you can cache the whole page. Then the next is fragment caching. Fragment caching allows you to cache a portion or fragment of a page only. This is useful when a page contains some dynamic content that can be separated from the rest of the page, okay? And this is the most used real base scenario also, right? The last type of caching is data caching. Data caching allows you to cache the data retrieved from the database or other data sources. Like this can improve the performance by reducing the number of database calls, okay? Great. Now you know the 3 types of caching and the basic idea of caching. What are the types of state management? Good question, but have a very theoretical answer, okay? So first of all, what is state management? State management refers to storing data that is required by a web application to track information between user request and server responses. For example, you only log in one time to a website like Facebook, right? And then you navigate here and there in the web Facebook, sending many requests and getting many responses from Facebook, but Facebook never asks you the username again to validate you, because Facebook used one of the state management techniques to store your user credentials based on and based on that it is sending your responses all over again and again. Now here is the list of the types of state management techniques in ASP.NET. Basically we have 2 categories here, client side and server side. In client side, the information is stored at the client or user machine, or you can say the browser, client browser history. Whereas in the server side, the information is stored at the server, okay? Now let's see one by one the working of the client side state management technique first. First one is cookies. Cookies is a mechanism for storing small amounts of data on the client machine. For example, your username or password, a small amount, remember. Then second is hidden fields. Hidden fields are HTML form elements that can be again used for storing the data on the client side. They are often used to pass data between different pages, okay? Next one is view state. View state is a mechanism that stores the data on the client side as a hidden field only, but view state is useful for persisting data between the post bags, okay, like the button click, the post bags. That view state you can use to persist the data. Then next one, the client side technique is query string. Query string is a mechanism for passing the data from one page to another page through the URL, okay? But it is not secure because your URL is always visible to the clients, so they can modify it, right? So it's not that secure. Now then we have the server side techniques, state management techniques. The first most popular one is session state. Session state is a server-side mechanism that allow you to store user-specific data on the server. Now, session state uses a session ID to associate data with a specific user. So this session ID, based on this session ID, your data will be stored on the server, and different, like between different page requests, your data will persist. Then we have application state. Application state is a server-side management system that allows you to store data that is shared by all the users of an application. So here the difference between session and application is session is specific to user, but application state is common to all users. Okay. Application state can be used to persist the data and needs to be available throughout the application. Okay. Then the last type of server state management technique is caching. Caching is a server-side mechanism that allows you to store frequently accessed data in memory. Cache can be used to improve the information of the application by reducing the number of database calls needed to retrieve the data, right? I hope now you have a good understanding of some of the basic state management techniques in ASP.NET Web Forms. Where the view state is stored after the page post back? Very short question. Simple answer is view state is stored in the hidden field on a page at client side. Okay. What are the different ways to store session state in ASP.NET? First is, what is session state? Session state, we already know, is a mechanism that enables you to store data on server side for multiple requests. It allows you to persist data between different pages. Okay, that we already know. Now here are the three ways to store the session state on server in ASP.NET. Okay, they are in process, state server, and SQL server. These are the three ways. State server and SQL server together are also called like out proc session state. Okay, so one is in proc, one is out proc. Now these are the can be stored in two ways. So first is in proc session state. This is the default session state management in ASP.NET, where session data is stored in the memory of the same web server where the application is hosted. Okay, you have to set the mode to in proc like this to in the config file only. Okay. Second technique is state server session state. Now in this session is this mode stores the session data in the separate process called the ASP.NET State Service, which runs outside the web server process where the application is hosted. Now here you can see, you can set the mode to the state server, and then you have to provide the connection string of the separate process like this also, like the what is the address of the that separate server, because it is not the same server in case of a state server, right? Now the last one is SQL server session state. This mode stores session data in the SQL Server database, which provide the highest level of reliability and scalability and security, because database servers are more secure than normal servers. In this case also, you have to set the mode to SQL Server and set the connection string of the database in the configuration file. So this is like in the in proc, you do not have to provide the connection string because that is the same server, right? All right, now I think you know all the ways to store the session state in your for your application. What is cookieless session? All right, by default a session uses a browser cookie in the background. Okay, so like to pass the data from the client to the server. Now you can set this configuration as cookieless. So in cookieless session, the session is passed via the URL instead of cookie like this. Okay, so for example, here you can see this encoded session ID which is passed with the help of the URL. This is cookieless session. So you have to set this cookieless to enable this cookieless session. We need to change some same configuration in the configuration file like this. Okay, here you can set the cookieless to true, and that will enable the cookieless session, but by default it is false. Okay, it is not there, so that means it is false. So this is the answer, or short answer of this simple question. Here is a very short question: how to force all the validation controls to run in a page in Webforms. You want that all the validation should happen for a page with a simple code. The one line answer is: the page.validate method is used to force all the validation control to run on the page. This method you can use in your code behind files. Okay, so that is the simple and short answer of this question.